Next year, maybe we can just trade places. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole coming to you on a snowy, cold Sunday morning, first week of January behind us, and we are moving slowly and coldly through winter. And with this, as I'm coming to do the program today, the NFL, of course, is completing its season. There's just a handful of games still to be played, and I just want to go over the playoff possibilities. Remember, if you recall, a few shows ago, I did a little research on what teams you might be looking for and who might have the best chance at winning the Super Bowl, the glory game. I'm going to turn that off for now. And I did a little breakdown. I just gathered the stats from football, one of the websites, and I just want to go over some of the teams that are making the playoffs. Now, first of all, in the American Conference, you have Miami, Buffalo, Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Houston, and Kansas City. And as I'm right now going to tape this show, those are the 7 teams that have qualified for the AFC playoffs. In the NFC, you have Dallas, Philly, Detroit, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, LA, with Green Bay and New Orleans outstanding right now. That last playoff spot is going to be fought for later in the day. And with this, I thought about the cartoon today, about the whole Belichick and about Mike Tomlin. First of all, I think both franchises have been privileged to have these two coaches for them. They've won a ton of games. In fact, I was looking, just going through this. Belichick, of course, is 302 total wins over a career between Cleveland and New England. And, of course, Mike Tomlin has spent his whole career with Pittsburgh. He's got 173 plus another playoff appearance this year. And the thing that's impressive with Tomlin, he's never had a losing season. He's had 500 years when they played 500 ball at 8-8, 8-8, and 8-8. He had 3 years doing so. But still, his teams are always competitive. They're always strong on defense. A little bit, shall we say, they have been coming up short offensively, which is going to be, I think, to their detriment in the playoffs going forward. But I just want to take a look at this. First of all, Belichick and Tomlin. Everybody is, and I thought of this on a lark. Sometimes I get my inspiration from the cartoons just while I'm reading in bed or just listening, and I'm listening to the sports talk pundits, and then I start putting 2 and 2 together, and I say, why doesn't Belichick and Tomlin just switch places? That would be kind of cool. They would bring winning, maybe a different kind of attitude, maybe a different kind of philosophy, that cliche football philosophy. What's your philosophy? I think every football coach's philosophy is just to win, baby. I think that's one thing I always loved about Al Davis. Just win. That's your objective. How do you win? Well, you go about it in different ways. If you got great speed and a great quarterback, just throw the heck out of the football. If you got a great defense, just make sure that the offense doesn't mess up and you win those tight battles. That being said, these two guys, Belichick and Tomlin, are definitely on the Hall of Fame train. There's no question about that. For Belichick, can he become the all-time winningest coach, surpassing Halas and Shula? For Tomlin, I didn't realize this. They're both in their careers. All right. Tomlin has 173 wins over 17 years. That's 10 wins a year. And Belichick over 29 years is 302 wins. He's averaged 10 wins a year. And I just want to tell you this. Even though Belichick has had some miserable seasons like this year, just losing to the Jets, he was 8-9 in 2022. In 2020, he was 7-9. Those are 3 losing seasons. He had back-to-back 5-11 seasons with Cleveland and then with New England. He had back-to-back 7-9 seasons after going 6-10 with Cleveland in his first year. So basically, you're talking about 5, You're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 years, 8 out of the 29 years where he's been under 500. The 21 seasons that he was over 500, ready for this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 seasons of 10 wins or better. Plus, of course, a handful of Super Bowl rings, not just with New England, but also with the Giants. Just a superlative coach. Now, what I do appreciate him is what the media probably hates about him. And that is, I love his press conferences because in a lot of ways he has such contempt for the media. And I think what he has the most contempt for is what I just spoke about, and that is cliches. And we all use them. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. You know, you got to take one day at a time. My offensive philosophy, my defensive philosophy, this. But I think that Belichick has a good kind of contempt for the press, because many times us watching the press, we kind of get mad at some of the questions, inane as they are, that they pose to the coaches. My favorite is, how do you feel now that you just lost the Super Bowl in the last seconds? How does this moment feel for you? And that's asked in a number of different ways from different reporters all through football's history, going all the way back to Super Bowl I. But anyway, I would love to see them just switch positions. Can you imagine Bill Belichick? And the more and more I'm thinking of this, the cartoon itself, yeah, maybe it gives you a quick laugh and stuff, but you know, it might be telling. Tomlin going to the Patriots, how cool would that be? And of course, what about Belichick going to the Steelers? He would be in a great spot there because I still believe in Pickens. I still think he has a future. Maybe, you know, and again, I'm going to sound cliche this year. Maybe the philosophies of Tomlin and Pickens just didn't right themselves. Maybe they just weren't on the same page. But Belichick comes in there. He might have, you know, maybe he has the same kind of charm or, I don't know, connection that he had with Brady. And Tomlin going to the Patriots, maybe he instills, here comes another cliche, maybe he instills a different type of culture into the Patriot locker room. But it'd be kind of cool. Just trade them. And I know that probably the Steelers will probably, ironically, have to go through a Rooney rule first and interview a minority coach. But in the end, they would probably hire Belichick because, 1, he's a winner. 2, he's a winner. 3, he's a winner. And 4, it would just make for great NFL coverage in the offseason, preseason. I like to call it exhibition season. Let's not be euphemistic with the preseason. It's exhibition games. They make it worse by not even playing. They're starters for more than 3-4 plays. And you can understand why. I get that. Still charge an arm and a leg for the tickets. But it would be a great off-season banter. What can Tomlin do? Will they see each... well, you would probably be comparing the franchises after a while. It would be a lot of fun. Belichick traded today for Mike Tomlin and a couple of draft picks, which will be decided later by both teams. But it is kind of incredible, both coaches. I've always loved Tomlin. I just love that, I don't know, he just never seems to panic. And of course, Belichick is my favorite coach of all time to draw on cartoon. I always do him in the hoodie. Kind of reminds me of Doonesbury's feather for vice president under George Bush. And of course, his name escapes me now. I'll think of it a little bit later. But he drew a feather to represent the vice president during the first Bush years in office from 88 to 92. And that's what it always reminds me of when I draw kind of Belichick in the hoodie. You don't see him. You just hear his thoughts, or just read his thoughts, rather. And I think I think it kind of captures him being in the hood and not being able to see his true face, his true emotions, his true demeanor. Tomlin was fun today because as I was drawing him, and I'll show it to you again, I realized, man, these two guys are very much similar. Dan Quayle. It just came to me. Dan Quayle, the vice president. Gary Trudeau in Doonesbury used to draw him as a floating feather. And so that's why I say the man in the hood. Belichick reminds me of that. Anyway, so I was looking at the stats, and the two are incredible. It's going to be great to see Tomlin one more time with the Steelers. I do, I have my kids at school always ask me, who do I root for? Originally, I was a Cowboy fan, just like my brother Jim. I just followed his teams and really loved to follow him with him. And we had a lot of ups and downs with the Cowboys. Then they finally won. And it's funny. After they won, we didn't like them as much. And the teams that we used to hate as kids who used to beat the Cowboys, the Packers and the Browns, we started to like. And I think there were three reasons. I always tell my kids at school, there's three reasons why I'll follow a team. And I don't have a favorite team in the NFL. College, a little bit different. And even there, I have several favorite teams. Notre Dame, Army, of course, Air Force, BC, and Navy. I like all those. Don't like the big-time schools. Although I love teams like Temple, any team, the Boise States. And as a matter of fact, I'm just going off on a tangent. I watched some of that Orange Bowl of Boise State when they upset Oklahoma with the Statue of Liberty. Man, that was a fantastic game at the end. I wish more coaches operated both in the college and in the pro level, especially when these games don't matter. I wish they would just risk everything out on the field. Not obviously the player's health or anything like that, but just take chances because the games don't matter. Anyway, getting back, I was watching at Boise State, but some of my favorite teams in the NFL now, I love the teams that play on grass. I love the teams that play in the cold. I love the teams, obviously, that play outside. And, of course, New England played the Jets today. Yeah, it was on the snow, but it was on the carpet. So even though the guys got wet and soaked and stuff, there was no mud. And you guys know, I always talk about that 65 NFL championship game between Green Bay and Cleveland. Model in Mud, Jim Kinnicky. I finally remembered his name for once. And I've shown that picture. To me, it's the quintessential picture of the NFL of the 1960s. What we, now I'm in my 60s, but what we remember football being growing up as a 10 or 11-year-old. And so I love the teams that play in the grass. They play outside, obviously, and play in the cold, because I think that's where football is most fun. So, yeah, I do. I tell you, the Buffalo, they're missing something by not playing on grass. I know they play on the turf, and they've been doing that for almost actually like 5 decades. But if you take a look at the old Buffalo Bills highlight reels from the 60s when they were playing at War Memorial, that thing was just a swamp. It had to be about not 5 inches, but about 5 feet of mud. And these players, as soon as they walked out, they were just covered in Mother Earth. It was great. Anyway, getting back, once again, I tell you all the time, this is, and I hope that you have fun with this. It's like we're sitting at the bar thinking about things, and one thing leads into another. We're having a couple of beers and a hamburger after a game, and just things that just hit me. And I do have a theme for this week. It's it's about the offense and defense, maybe teams that you can kind of say, you know what, I think they got a pretty good shot for the Super Bowl. And then I'd like to do in the last couple of minutes something, and I'll make it like a part 1, to tell the truth, celebrities. Anyway, let's get to this. Miami leads the league in offense. Now, as I have stated in the past, 11 teams that led the league in offense went on to win the Super Bowl. There have only been 5 teams. Now, we have to think about that in context as well. Only been 5 teams that have averaged over 30 points a game and won the Super Bowl. And they were Washington, Denver, San Francisco, New Orleans and Tampa Bay. And for those who have just started watching football and much, much younger than me, Washington, Denver, and San Francisco, they were pretty much return teams back in the 90s. It seemed like either Washington was playing Denver or Denver was playing San Francisco, or one of those three teams was facing another NFC team or AFC team. But it just seemed to be, because Washington was in 4 Super Bowls under Gibbs, won 3 of them. San Francisco, of course, was 5 under Bill Walsh, but they had Montana and then they had Steve Young. And San Francisco beat Denver. They beat Cincinnati twice. They beat San Diego, or now the LA Chargers. All right. And I think they might have beaten, trying to think who else they beat offhand. Anyway, Washington, of course, lost to the Raiders, beat the Dolphins, beat the Buffalo Bills, and beat the Denver Broncos with Tim Smith rushing for all those yards. And, of course, Denver beat, in back-to-back years, Atlanta and Green Bay, along with all those unbelievable losses to San Francisco, to Washington, to the Giants, and to Dallas, okay? But for a while there, Washington, Denver, San Francisco, you had the Giants in there for 2, 86 and 91. Yeah, of course you had the Cowboys. It just seemed to be the NFC East and Denver were in the Super Bowl year in and year out. But anyway, Miami, which has not been to a Super Bowl since, San Francisco defeated them in Palo Alto. I'm sorry. They're averaging 30.1 points a game. Interestingly enough, they are right now at 23.1 points per game in defense. Now, it's not in the top 10, but it's not in the lower top. It's not one of the lowest ones. Interestingly enough, San Francisco, one of those other teams that averaged 30 points a game to win a Super Bowl, they're at 29.4 and actually tied with Dallas for the second and third spots in the NFL. Baltimore is 4th at 28.4, followed by Buffalo at 26.9. Detroit is tied actually with Buffalo. Philadelphia at 26.4. Now, the reason I bring up Philadelphia, I know I have a lot of kids who are Philly fans. The problem with Philly is, I didn't realize how porous their defense has been. Not only are they the lowest of the playoff teams, but they are about 26th out of 32 teams in the NFL this year. They're surrendering 25 points per game. And as I told you, I think the worst defense to win a Super Bowl was the New York Giants. They were 25th. So it's going to be interesting. Can the Philadelphia Eagles really overcome a weak defense and find their way deep into the playoffs? The best defense, of course, the Baltimore Ravens at 16.5. Now, if you had the best defense, you've won the Super Bowl 15 times. And as I said, if you had the best offense, you've won it 11 times. And actually, if you had one of the 3 top defenses, you've won half of the Super Bowls, 25. I'll even go farther than that. If you have the top 4 defenses, you've won the Super Bowl 28 times, more than half. If you had the top offense, 1, 2, 3, or 4, you've won the Super Bowl 8, 9, 7, 28 times as well. Right now, top defenses, Baltimore, San Francisco, Kansas City. I was surprised at that. And, of course, Buffalo. And I was surprised at that. So they got hot, as I said they would. I really did. I really believe in Josh Allen. I think along the way, he's going to correct many of his mistakes. He's a good quarterback, has made some early mistakes. He's gotten much better. I know they had that tough loss to Philadelphia over the Thanksgiving Day weekend, but they've really been they've been winning. And the top offenses, of course, were Miami, San Francisco, Dallas, and Baltimore. Baltimore has really put themselves by these stats in a pretty good situation to win the whole thing. Do I think they will? I'll let you know next week. Well, I think they got a good chance. I'm going to be very honest with you. I have Dallas and Buffalo going to the Super Bowl. And I had said that about maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I have Dallas and Buffalo going to the Super Bowl. I don't know why. I just, and the more and more I see, Dallas tied for the second best offense. Dallas's defense is only 19.1. Like I said, Buffalo's at 26.9. Their defense, not bad, 18.6, puts them in the top 5 run for the best defense this league. And of course, as I said, you got to put it in context. It's not about the points. It's the position of the team in terms of all the other players or all the other teams in the league that year. All right. Last couple of minutes of the show, and I promise I'm going to do a little bit more. Just thought I'd have fun here. I like to go onto the computer and find old shows. And one that I was always particularly liked was one that used to be on at about 2:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoons, Monday through Friday. And it was called To Tell the Truth. And I just remember coming home from school, and my mother, oh man, she was just incredible. Just a machine in terms of all the work that she did every day. But she would use that moment from 2:30 to 3, not to rest, but to do her ironing, because she was anticipating us coming through the door, and she knew that we were going to have a snack. And it was great. She used to turn on the TV, the black and white, in the TV room. I'm sure everybody remembers that in my house. And we would watch probably the tail end of To Tell the Truth. And the game, of course, if you haven't seen it, you have 3 people who are, 2 imposters and the real person. And usually they have a really good story. Either they're an author or an artist. They've scaled Mount Everest like Sir Edmund Hillary, or they've written the bestseller, but nobody knows who they are, or they're a cartoonist. Trudeau was on it. So was Hank Ketchum, who did Dennis the Menace. Chick Young, who did Blondie. The cartoonist for Dick Tracy, Chester Gould. And they also had celebrities, actors and actresses. But they also had athletes on, which I was always amazed at how the panel. Now, there's 4 panelists, and they were all, interestingly enough, let me just set this up even better. The show initially took place in New York. They did have a Sunday night version of the show, plus a weekly show. And Bud Collyer, I do believe, was the first host of the show. And of course, my brother always likes to tell me, Eddie, that he was the voice of Superman. And he even did it when Filmation did the cartoons of Superman and Batman in the late 60s. Make a long story even longer, he was the host or the MC, and he had a panel of 4 celebrities. Usually, I never realized this. Many of them were, let's say, Broadway stars who were doing this in addition to acting on Broadway. They might have been up-and-coming comedians, like Johnny Carson was on the show, Dick Van Dyke. But they usually had, as I remember as a kid, it always seemed to be the same 3 people: Kitty Carlisle, Orson Bean, and Peggy Cass were the 3 people that were always on that show. And then they always had a kind of like a guest. I watched these old shows. I can't believe some of the guests that they had as panelists, like Gene Rayburn. But the one guy who I'm going to do a statistical study on how accurate he is. I always thought Kitty Carlisle was pretty good figuring out who the real guy telling or woman telling the story was, and able to figure out who the real one was from the 2 imposters. And that was the whole thing. So you had 3 challengers. One was the actual person that the story they had to figure out who it was. And you had 2 imposters. Sometimes the imposters are really good, that you would sit there and say, man, they all sounded pretty legit. Other times, wow, even you as an 8 or 9-year-old could figure out, wow, I think the celebrity, the panelists just caught them in a quote unquote lie. But anyway, you go through 2 minutes of banter, question and answer between the panelists and the challengers, and then they would vote. And I used to love Orson Bean. He stood out because he used to like draw some cartoons. If it was number 2 and the guy was a snake charmer, he wrote the number 2 in the sign of a cobra. It was kind of cool. Anyway, I'm watching these shows and I'm starting to realize, wow, there's quite a few athletes on this show. And the panelists never knew who they were, except for many times Tom Poston, who was just incredible. Now, I may have just seen the greatest Tom Poston, to tell the truth, episodes. I don't know. But he always seems to have to get 2 of the 3 on each show, because there was 3 separate games that they would play. Many times he'd get 3. But he would see something, and I would love to know how he knew which was which. It was kind of fun. Anyway, I just figure I'd go over some of the athletes that were on the show and just take a little time. As I found this website, there's actually a To Tell the Truth website. I guess it's for crazy people like me who just love the show and want to participate by, I don't know, providing episodes or little anecdotes about the shows and all the rest of it. But guys like Alex Webster, who would go on and coach the Giants, guys like Bob Tucker, all right, who was a tight end for the Giants, guys like Y.A. Tittle, Hall of Famer. All right. I didn't know this. His name was Old Reliable or the Bald Eagle. Along with that Jim Kinnicky picture, the other probably quintessential, well, now I'm being redundant, but the other great picture, probably from the 1960s, is Y.A. Tittle. He's kneeling in the end zone. And of course, he is bald. His hair is going back. It's receding. And there's this blood just pouring down the front after he got hit. And his helmet, of course, is off. And he's just kneeling there. And you can tell it's at the tail end of his career. He's probably, it seems like he's about 60. He's probably about 38 to 42 tops. And you can just see he was always chasing the dream of winning a championship. And man, he gets knocked, blood streaming down his face. And you can just see kind of an emptiness in his demeanor, in his face, saying like, wow, like I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to win. It's just a great, iconic picture of a good quarterback who just never got over the top with good teams with the Giants. But he is a Hall of Famer, 3-time All-Pro, 63 MVP, 7-time Pro Bowl, even though they didn't call it Pro Bowl way back when, and played for a host of teams. He was in the old AAFC, came actually from San Francisco, the 49ers, and then late in his career at age 35 with the Giants, he was there. Actually, he did play until age 38, but if you take a look at this picture, he looks like he's about 42. YA actually had a record of 78, 50, and 5. With the Giants, he was 32 and 13. Now, you can remember, the Giants, they got to a couple of championship games, either got beat by the Bears, 1963, or the Packers in 62, and I believe in 61. Let me just check that. I think the Packers beat them also. Lost the championship 37-0 to the Packers. Now that I don't believe, I can't remember. Now I'm going to have to look it up. I don't know. I can't remember where that picture of him kneeling down with the blood, what game that was. I don't even know if that was a championship game. But like I said, it was a great one. Another guy, I never knew this, was a pitcher by the name of Earl Wilson. Now, the reason why I point him out is I think you can see the gist of this. Most of, To Tell the Truth, was filmed in New York City. So I am sure, and I would love to know how they got the imposters to be on that show. I always thought, watching the show, that they probably picked people out of the audience on the day of the show, gave them some information, gave them a synopsis of what their episode was going to be about, and then lo and behold, we'll go. But I'm almost convinced that they probably put almost classifieds looking for people to appear on the show, because many times, like for instance, Don Drysdale, ex-Brooklyn Dodger, but L.A. Dodger, he was one of the few people, let's say, out of the New York area that was on TV. Well, on To Tell the Truth, I'll give you another one. Gordie Howe, the great Detroit Red Wing. He was on the show when the Red Wings were in town for a game against the Rangers. And they did that with a couple of other hockey players too. But Earl Wilson, I have not seen this episode. 27.6 WAR, not bad. 121, 109, 369 ERA. Had some good seasons. Type of pitcher, he went, and I'm using baseball reference, 13-11 over his career. That would be his 162 game ledger for the season with a 3.69 ERA. Now, kind of a high ERA during that time. Put it in context. Baseball, of course, it was probably one of the low points in terms of offense, the 60s. And, of course, in 68, you get the year of the pitcher. And in 1969, they lowered the mound and all the rest of it. Although Mike Marshall, I remember saying in Ball 4 that it didn't help the hitters. It actually helped the pitchers because he had some crazy formula or crazy physics on the whole thing. And I'm not going to, one, expound on it or even explain it or even say that Marshall was inept because I don't even understand it. But some of it kind of, I guess, makes sense with his theory. But in 69, lo and behold, there was expansion, 4 new teams. Offense kind of, lots of home runs were hit. Offense kind of came back. You know, instead of having a low of 301 by Carl Yastrzemski, you've got, Pete Rose hitting 348. And in 1969, you have, oh boy, who led the league? You have Rod Carew leading the league in hitting in 69, okay? Anyway, what I liked about Earl Weaver, he would definitely be seen as a third pitcher and not a bad one because, look, he was double digits in wins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in 11 years in his major league career. He was 12-8. I'm just going to give you the outstanding ones. He was 12-8 in 1962 with the Sox. He was 18-11 with 2 teams. Detroit, Boston. Don't know why. Boston traded him to Detroit for during the 1966 season. He was 5-5. I guess, really, to be honest with you, probably the Red Sox kind of gave up on him because with the Red Sox, he was 2 games under 500 for his career. With Detroit, he has a 587 winning appearance, and he does pitch for that 68 Tiger team. In fact, he goes in 66 to the Tigers. Obviously, they don't win the pennant, but he goes 13-6 with a 2.59 ERA. And you can say this, too. Detroit was always seen as a hitter's ballpark, too, as was Fenway. So maybe a new environment, because the next year, in 1967, now the Red Sox win the pennant, and Detroit finished second, I think second or third place, because there were 4 teams vying. Actually, it was Boston, Minnesota, California, Detroit. Yeah, and in one respect, the White Sox, I don't think they were there at the end, but 5 teams going into the last, let's say, 2 weeks of the season, all vying for the pennant. But that year, 67, and he didn't make the All-Star team. He was 22-11 with a 3.27 ERA. So in 2 seasons, not even 2 seasons with the Tigers, he was 35-17. He follows that in 68. I guess somebody had to take the losses on a team with Lolich, who won 17, and of course Denny McClain, who won 31. In 68, he was 13-12. That's a 5.20 ERA. That's going to get you at least 85, 86 wins if you're a major league team each year. Though that's not something to just toss away with a 2.85 ERA. He threw 224 innings. Actually, for that 66 season, he threw 260. Ready for this? This is why I'm saying this guy is a good pitcher. He threw 200 innings, over 200 innings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 years in a row. He pitched over 200 innings, with the low being 202 at age 29 in 1964. And he threw for 264 innings in 1966, in 1967, back-to-back 264 innings. And then he followed suit with 224 and 214. I mean, obviously the guy had a rubber arm. Very, very valuable. And, of course, he does get a World Series. Actually, I didn't know this. He finished his career with San Diego, goes 1-6. It's a shame. He's actually, if he had not pitched with San Diego in 1970, he would have finished with a career of 119 and 97. And I love that. When you can play at least 10, 11 years and for a pitcher not lose 100 or more games, I love that. I think that's very telling. You might even look at Earl Wilson in a different light. But he was a good pitcher, did what he had to do, was an innings eater, like we call today. Definitely would be your third, probably your fourth pitcher. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. Probably would be your third pitcher in the rotation of a 5-man, and maybe your fourth in a 4-man rotation. But a good pitcher nonetheless. And he was one of the contestants on To Tell the Truth. And the shame is they probably really needed the money then, the ball players. So going on that show, and if you ever recall, even I figured this out as a kid, for every time that they were able to stump the panel, the 3 contestants would receive $250, but not each. They'd have to split that. And if they stumped the panel entirely, they would get $1,000. Now, I know that they bumped that up in the later shows with Joe Garagiola as your MC or Bill Cullen, but I just remember Garagiola being one of the MCs on that team. They did bump it up, but I always thought, even as a kid, all right, so $250. You got to divide that by 3. So that's 80 some odd dollars. And then I would always say, even with $1,000, because sometimes kids would appear on the show. They were an Eagle Scout who saved some damsel in distress from, a runaway railroad or something, a train on a railroad track. And if they stumped the panel, they would receive $1,000. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, so they split that 3 ways. That's $333.33. I always wondered who was getting the extra penny. And I was thinking, I'm hoping it's the guy who was the actual person, because without him, those other 2 people wouldn't be there. Anyway, didn't realize this about Alex Webster. I remember Alex Webster being the coach of the Giants in the early 70s. He was a Giant. And again, he does fit the bill. One of those Giants, probably an athlete, very available to tell the truth. Hey, listen, we're in New York. Can you come in and be an imposter? Or because there were athletes who were imposters on the show, or can you be one of the contestants? And didn't know this. Alex Webster went to North Carolina State, grew up in Kearney, I think he went to Kearney High School. That's how I would interpret this from Football Reference. He was a running back and a receiver, but he was an offensive player. Right halfback, they call it. Fullback. Played, I couldn't believe how many years he played, from 1955 to 1964, and then he would coach the Giants. And he was actually the coach of the Giants in 1970 when they finished 9-4-1 and missed out on going to the playoffs. I just remember that year with the Giants because they lost to the Rams, and the Cowboys, who were 10-4 that year, needed the Rams to beat them, and the Rams beat them at Yankee Stadium, and they throttled them like 30-3. So I remember that and I recall that. And the last guy I'm going to get to, because I'm going to have some more fun with this, I'm going to just get to Don Drysdale. Let me just put him in here. Drysdale, of course, Hall of Famer. Don Drysdale, always, you would see him in shows like The Rifleman. He did some acting. I always thought he was kind of a funny guy. And when he was on, the funny thing is, if you see him on the episode, and this is why I knew they probably had to go out and recruit. Drysdale, of course, is 6'5". They couldn't get me from the audience or some other guy. I'm only 5'10", barely. They probably had to go out and really get athletes. And they did. They got 2 other athletes. I can't recall who they were. Actually, the 2 other guys, one was 6'4", and the other guy was like 6'7". And I just remember that I was stunned that the guys didn't know who Drysdale was. And even the women panelists didn't know. And he was, I believe, at that time already appearing on, the TV shows. He was, like I said, in The Rifleman. He might have been in Bonanza. But I know that he had a quote-unquote film career in Hollywood. And of course, he goes on to be an announcer. He's pretty good. His career, 209, 166, 557 ERA, 295 winning percentage, .295 ERA. I know that there are some maybe critics of Drysdale saying that he benefited from playing in Dodger Stadium. That's like saying that a guy who hits 500 home runs and plays in a bandbox, like somehow that's his fault. Drysdale did what he had to do. And as I always like to say, well, there are 8 others besides Koufax. There are 9 other guys on that Dodger pitching staff each year that didn't do what Drysdale did, playing in the same park. And you got to remember that those Dodger teams did not have a lot of offense. And ready for this, he was effective. Baseball Reference, I do it kind of gets me angry when they do sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, like 162 game ledger, and he walks away with a 14-11 record. Now, the only reason I say it is because if you look at Gibson and Seaver, it's kind of like the same kind of stats. It's not overwhelming. And I would wish that they would also do their stats in their prime, like pick 7 great years for these guys who lasted, let's say, 20 years. What would they do in those years? Regardless, he did lead the league. His best year was 62, 25-9. Dodgers, of course, lose in the playoffs to the Giants, and of course the Giants lose the World Series. The following year, 1963, he goes 19-17. His ERA is down 20 points from 2.83 in his best year to 2.63, and I'm talking about wins. All right, 735 winning percentage in 62, and then in 63, when the Dodgers win it all, he goes 19-17, and then in 64, great season in terms of ERA, 2.18 with an 18-16 mark, and then he goes 23-12 in 1965, a year that, of course, they also win the World Series. Don Drysdale had a 2.77 ERA. I pick out those 4 years because he led the league in games started. And in all 4 of those years, he pitched not 150 and not 200 innings and not 250 innings. He pitched over 300 innings. His low being at age 1965, he pitched 308 innings. The others were 321, 315, 314. Incredible. Don Drysdale, one of the contestants on To Tell the Truth. Hey, this is Will O'Toole. I'm glad that you joined me. I hope you enjoyed the show. Shout out to Howard because I will be sending you some pictures of these guys as well. Computer wasn't working. See you guys next week, or my printer wasn't working. See you guys next week with another edition. I'll come back to more of To Tell the Truth. Thank you.